We're continuing our special coverage of the San Bernardino shootings, and we want to bring in now former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole. Mary Ellen, thanks for joining us. We know the motive is still a mystery, but we have learned a lot about these suspects. A married couple with a 6-month-old baby, 28-year-old Saeed Farouk and 27-year-old Tashfeen Malik. Let's just start there. What does that say to you, especially that there is a female in the mix?
Well, it's unusual. It's very unusual. And it also suggests that, at least at this point, she was committed to this plan, which means that she was part of the strategic planning. She was part of carrying it out. Now, what will be interesting is to learn what her behavior was like inside the shooting. So if she stood back, did he do all the shooting? My sense is they both did the shooting. It's also important to understand what they were doing while they were shooting. What's been explained is that they didn't say anything, that they just kind of methodically went through and shot people. Now, what that tells me is that they were calm, they were in control, they were able to think logically and strategically when everybody else inside that room was terrified, horrified, probably crying and screaming. You've got these two people who were so cold and callous, very likely, that they were able to think and use their cognitive abilities. And that, again, that goes to a coldness and callousness that really isn't that usual.
You know, some of Farouk's co-workers have spoken about him, and they describe a guy who's pretty likable, no real problems at work, somewhat quiet, but nothing out of the ordinary. Does that surprise you at all?
It does not surprise me at all, because every time an offender is arrested, whether it's a serial murder or a mass murder, they interview the neighbors or a coworker, and they say he was really a nice guy. And why is that? It's because these offenders don't want their plans to be interrupted. So they do put their trappings of normalcy out there so that people do think that they're just a regular person and that they're not threatening or dangerous in any way. But violence is very deep, and this person was really committed to carrying out this plan. So if he showed trappings of being violent or planning violence, it could have interfered with his plan. So it was really manipulative that he came across that way, especially in the days close to the shooting.
Let's also talk about the information we're getting from CBS Radio News correspondent Steve Futterman. We know that Farouk went to Saudi Arabia last spring. We know he met his wife online. There's all these questions about, was this terrorism? What do those things tell you?
There's a lot of information that has to be gleaned from that, and that's going to take some time. But there could have been, at that point, the beginning of behavior and evidence to suggest that these two individuals were going to ultimately conspire to carry out this crime. Did it happen immediately? Did it happen before they met? The investigation will show that, but they will go back because it's extremely important to know at what point in their relationship did they begin to plan this. And as you've been pointing out all morning so well, this really is a very well-designed plan. It was very effective, unfortunately. So this planning took days, weeks, months to carry out. So when did it first get started?
You know, Meg, you mentioned that they have a 6-month-old daughter. I think that point really has people scratching their heads. They can't imagine how parents of such a young baby would drop that child off to the grandmother and go off and do something like this. You're the expert, though. Is that surprising news to you?
No, it isn't, because look at the behavior that we see in its totality. It's been described that their garage was an IED factory. So if they're in there putting bombs together, using explosive materials that can be very volatile, and they have a 6-month-old upstairs sleeping, that is the same thing. It's showing callousness and disregard for that little child that's depending on them to be cared for. So you don't look at just one behavior. You look at a series of behaviors in order to make conclusions about people and their personality. So I see indicators that these parents were more concerned by this mission, far more concerned by this mission than they were about their daughter, and that's cold and callous.
And before we let you go, Mary Ellen, I did want to ask you about that when the investigators went into their garage, they described it as an IED factory, as you said. When they were killed in that shootout, they were in assault-style clothing, assault rifles, handguns. How about the mass of weapons that they had?
That goes to how mission-oriented that they were. That goes towards how committed they were to carry out this shooting and maybe even other shootings that they never were able to complete. It goes to their mindset in terms of how they viewed this as a military mission, and they were going to bring every weapon and every bullet and every explosive that they could make to that scene. So I think it goes really to their mindset and to their commitment.
You know, often when we see these mass shootings, the investigation inevitably sort of looks towards social media. Many times these shooters may leave clues about their state of mind. Do you expect to see something like that in this case?
I do. I really do. I think because, number one, they're in that age where they utilize social media, that they will have posted something. So I do think that we will find something. I certainly hope so, but I do think we will.
And speaking of their age, this is an age where they fit the profile for being radicalized?
Well, that age group is very important. We see the age range from the late teens to the late 20s, so they do fit that age range.
All right, Mary Ellen O'Toole, former FBI profiler, thank you so much. We will check back with you throughout the day. Appreciate it.